And now to introduce this morning's GreenGov 2015 keynote speaker, here's the Senior Vice President and General Manager of HP's Enterprise Services, U.S. Public Sector, Marilyn Crouther.
Good morning. I'm Marilyn Crouther, and I lead our HP Enterprise Services U.S. Public Sector business. It's wonderful to be here with you this morning to support this important green government initiative. HP is the world's largest provider of information technology infrastructure, software, services, and solutions. Over the past decade, we've taken measurable steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across our entire value chain. In fact, in 2013, HP was the first major IT company to publish and verify our complete carbon footprint. Armed with this insight, we've set industry-leading goals to reduce not only our own impact, but the impact of our customers and our suppliers. We believe the IT industry is uniquely positioned to help lower carbon emissions across every sector. At HP, reductions in carbon emissions show up in innovations like our Moonshot servers that deliver the right size computing for the right workloads. For example, for big data applications, HP Moonshot servers utilize up to 65% less power, we use 90% less space, and 78% cost reductions than a traditional server. HP's Apollo 8000 system, a liquid-cooled supercomputer, helps organizations eliminate up to 3,800 tons of carbon dioxide waste from data centers on an annual basis. In fact, the National Renewable Energy Labs leveraged the Apollo 8000's unique design to create one of the greenest data centers in the world, using the waste heat from supercomputer to heat adjacent office and lab space. NREL has also stated that they are reducing their costs by $1 million per year. The machine, another recent HP innovation in development, will enable computing that is orders of magnitude faster, use optimal amount of energy in order to get the task done, and is built at a fraction of the size. At HP, we help our clients every day to achieve their business outcomes and meet their mission needs. As we continue our program this morning, it is my distinct honor to introduce our special guest and keynote speaker for GreenGov, Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus. Secretary Mabus is the 75th United States Secretary of the Navy and leads America's Navy and Marine Corps. As the Secretary of the Navy, Mr. Mabus is responsible for conducting the affairs of Department of Navy, including recruiting, organizing, equipping, training, and mobilizing. Additionally, he serves and oversees the construction and repair of naval ships, aircraft, and facilities, and formulates and implements policies and programs consistent with America's national security policies. Secretary Mabus is responsible for an annual budget in excess of $170 billion and leadership for more than 900,000 people. Upon assumption of office and throughout his tenure, he has prioritized improving the quality of life for sailors, Marines, and their families, decreasing the department's dependence on fossil fuels, strengthening partnerships, and revitalizing the Navy's shipbuilding program. Recognizing that energy is a national security interest, Secretary Mabus has directed the Navy and Marine Corps to change the way they use, produce, and acquire energy. He set an aggressive goal that no later than 2020, the Navy and Marine Corps will attain at least 50% of their energy from alternative resources. So, in pursuit of that goal, the Department of Navy has achieved several milestones. In 2012, President Obama announced in his State of the Union address that the Department of Navy will purchase or facilitate the production of 1 gigawatt of renewable energy for use on the Navy and Marine Corps installations. The Navy also demonstrated the Great Green Fleet in 2012, a carrier strike group in which every participating U.S. Navy ship and type of aircraft operated on an alternative energy sources, including nuclear and energy and biofuels. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a fellow Mississippian, Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus.
we Mississippians show up in some of the most interesting places. And thank you so much, and thank y'all for having me today. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to come up and chat and answer questions. I want to start out, as I do most of the time, with a real quick Navy 101. Why do we need a Navy? What does the Navy do for America? Now, our founders recognized the importance of a Navy. It's in our Constitution. The Constitution says in Article 1 that Congress has the ability to raise an army, but it is mandated to maintain a Navy. And in that not so subtle distinction is the difference. What the Navy and Marine Corps uniquely bring to this country is presence. Being around the globe, around the clock, being in the right place, not just at the right time, but all the time. To deter potential adversaries, to encourage allies, to respond to things like humanitarian assistance or disaster relief, to assert freedom of navigation, freedom of the seas, to do whatever it is that the country needs. And what this presence does is it gives our leaders options. Whatever the president decides, we should respond to a certain crisis, regardless of what that crisis is. The president will have a full range of options thanks to that Navy and Marine Corps presence. To get that presence, I've organized my thinking, as was said in the introduction, in around four fundamentals. People, platforms, partnerships, and power. People, our sailors and Marines, we've got the best force we've ever had. We've stressed them a lot. We routinely ask and expect them to do some of the hardest, most dangerous jobs that we have. We are trying to alleviate the stress, but also keep the people that we want in a myriad of ways. I'll mention just a couple. One is we've stood up a thing called Task Force Innovation, which is sort of an oxymoron to get a big bureaucracy to be innovative. But this is a crowdsourcing thing, or it's one of the aspects is a crowdsourcing aspect where you can, if you've got an idea of how to do your job better or how to do something in the fleet better, we've got a website. Type it in, we're going to debate it. A lot of this stuff reaches me and reaches the CNO. And we've begun to fund some of these initiatives that have come out of the crowdsourcing already. Because generally sailors on the deck plates on the ships know how to do this better than we do. A second thing is that a month ago at the Naval Academy, I announced a series of, I think, sweeping personnel changes of how we deal with the force, of things like trying to promote more on merit than on year group, of trying to make service far more flexible, more time for more paid maternity leave, for example, or opening child care earlier and keeping it open later. We don't have enough women in the Navy and Marine Corps, and we lose too many at the 8 to 12 year mark. And so what we're trying to do through things like career and admission programs, which says you can take off up to 3 years and without harming your career, is to get rid of the golden path where you have to check every single box, and if you miss one, your career is basically going to stall, and make it far more flexible so that you can leave, you can go outside, you can come back, you can operate more normally and more flexibly than you could otherwise. Second is platforms. Quantity has a quality all its own. On 9/11, 2001, the U.S. Navy had 316 ships. By 2008, after one of the great military buildups in our history, we were down to 278 ships. In the 5 years before I took this office, we put 27 ships under contract. That wasn't enough to keep the size of the fleet from getting smaller. And it also wasn't enough to keep our shipyards open. In the first 5 years I have been at Navy, we've put 70 ships under contract with a smaller top line. And we've done it just by using some very basic business principles. More competition, firm fixed price contracts, multi-year buys. Because in order to give that presence, you've got to have those big gray hulls out on the horizon. And shipbuilding takes a long time. It's very expensive. And the fleet that we're living with today is a result of decisions that were made 10, 12, 15 years ago. If we don't make these decisions today for the future, then the fleet that 10, 15 years from now that America will need simply won't be there. You cannot surge ships. You cannot build them just when you need them. And you don't have the skilled workforce there. And oh, by the way, we have not bought more ships at the expense of aircraft. We have also bought 40% more aircraft than in the first 5 years than in the previous 5. Third are partnerships. I travel a lot. In fact, my wife says that I probably need a name tag when I come home. I've been 1,050,000 air miles now, 132 different countries and territories. I travel for 2 reasons. One is to see sailors and Marines where they are, where they're forward deployed. America's Navy and Marine Corps are America's away team. We never have a home game. We're always forward. And unlike our sister services, we don't come home in times of peace. We deploy equally in times of peace and in times of war. And so going out, talking to sailors and Marines, seeing them where they are deployed, I think is crucial. And some of the best ideas in terms of personnel, in terms of how we do things, have come out of talks and all hands calls and questions that you get. And if you get questions over and over again, you know it's a concern among those sailors and Marines. The second reason, though, is to meet with our international friends and allies to talk about the exercises we're doing together, the training we're doing together, the operations we're doing together, to make sure that we are prepared in calmer times for when some crisis arises, that we know how each other operates, that we know how each other works. The final partnership, though, is with the American people. There's always a danger in a democracy with a volunteer force that the people being protected become separated from those doing the protecting. And so talking about the Navy and Marine Corps, getting people more involved, because such a small fraction of America serves in uniform today, is crucial to the people doing the protecting, our armed forces, but also the people being protected. And finally, and the reason for this meeting and so many of the things we've been doing, power. How do we fuel these ships and aircrafts and our bases? And if you want to see how power can be used as a weapon, how energy can be used as a weapon, you don't have to look any further than to see what Russia did in Crimea, is doing in Ukraine, is doing to Europe, but particularly Eastern Europe. And when I came into this job, partly based on the briefings that I got, getting ready for my confirmation hearings, and partly based on my time in Saudi Arabia as ambassador, was I don't want that weapon, energy, to be used against us. It is a national security thing. It's a strategic thing. It's a tactical thing. So, as was said, the biggest goal, that by no later than 2020, we will get at least half of all our energy, both afloat and ashore, from alternative fuel sources. And let me give you a little update. We're a seagoing service, but we also own 3.5 million acres of land, 117,000 buildings. We're going to be at that gigawatt that the President mentioned in his State of the Union by the end of this year. We're going to be 5 years early getting to that. So, a lot of people worked very, very hard on this. And one of the big changes that I've noticed is that it's no longer my initiative or a top-down initiative. It's a, we can do this. Whole of Navy, whole of Marine Corps. We're doing it almost exclusively through public-private partnerships, working with utilities, working with companies, giving them the land on basis to do things, or doing offtake contracts so that the financing works for them outside our bases. And one of the things I'm announcing today is that by the end of this month, we will have an RFP out for Joint Base Anacostia Bowling here in the district as part of this Capital Solar Challenge that GreenGov has been running. And what we're going to do is we're issuing an RFP for rooftop solar panels for parking lots and for ground-based. Open parking lots where you can put solar panels above cars. It's going to be 6 to 8 megawatts. It will generate about 10% of the power that Anacostia Bowling will need. And we're going to use it as a pilot for how we can do this other places, particularly urban places where there's not a whole lot of land available, not a whole lot of empty space available for photovoltaic arrays, where there's not just endless space like we have at some places to do things like this. So and there are special military considerations here. I mean, some parking lots you can't use because of force protection requirements. You want to be able to see people moving between vehicles, things like that. But there are a lot that we can. And this mixture of rooftop, parking lot, and open space, we think, again, particularly for bases in urban areas, holds a lot of promise in terms of, we're going to be at the gigawatt. I'm not satisfied with stopping there. We can do better than that over the next 5 years. At sea, we did demonstrate the Great Green Fleet. We're going to deploy the Great Green Fleet. Carrier Strike Group, the carrier's nuclear. Everybody else is going to be sailing on a blend of marine diesel and some sort of biofuels. All the aircraft will be flying on a blend of aviation gasoline and some sort of biofuels. We don't have many requirements for biofuels, but we do have some. One is it's got to be a drop-in fuel. We're not changing our engines. We got too many. We're not even changing the settings. It's got to be completely fungible with normal fossil-based fuel. Second is it can't take any land out of food production. So we're talking about second generation, third generation biofuels. And third, it's got to be cost competitive. So far, using various mechanisms, we're getting there on this biofuel initiative. Beside changing the types of fuels that we're using, and I'm absolutely neutral about feedstocks and things like that. I mean, on the biofuels, we're using everything from used cooking oil to agricultural waste to municipal landfill waste. The other things we're using, solar, wind, geothermal, hydrothermal, wave. All that helps us do the second thing, which is if something happens to the grid, we can pull ourselves off and still get essential military jobs done. So the next step is microgrids, setting up a way to store energy on a base or in a cluster of bases and keep going even if something happens to the larger civilian grid, that we can still operate. Besides changing those types of fuels though, we're also getting better at how much we use. Little things. And this was one of the things that came from the fleet. In 2003, a chief said, change the light bulbs on your ship. It didn't happen until last year. That's way too long. For those of you not in government, you recognize that. For those of you in government, we got a remedial course. We're happy to, 11 years or 12 years is just too long. But if you change the light bulbs from incandescent to LEDs on a Navy ship, it saves about 3% of the total energy that ship uses. We're doing other things. I mean, they're not high-profile things. We're doing hull coatings and stern flaps. We're doing voyage planning, so we go with the tides, with the currents, with the winds. And we are, again, there's this culture that's beginning to change. We've built 2 big deck amphibious ships, the America and the Macon Island, with hybrid drives. An electric drive for speeds under 12 knots, a normal gas turbine for speeds over 12 knots. First time Macon Island deployed for an 8-9 month deployment, they came back with almost half their fuel budget unspent. And so we're beginning to retrofit some of our destroyers. We're building an all-electric ship, the Zumwalt class, the DDG 1000 destroyer. All our ships are becoming much more energy dependent, much more energy needy, and so we've got to pay a lot of attention to this. But the Macon Island, when I went on board, the thing that they said was, I talked to the chief engineer and he said, you know, this is a great ship and this hybrid drive is terrific. He said, but the main reason we saved so much was second class petty officers would come up and say, I got an idea about how I can run this area better, about how I can get more efficiency out of my piece of equipment. And it's the culture that's now, in Navy terms, on the deck plates. When you think of United States Marines, probably the first thing that springs to your mind is not ardent environmentalist. Or as one of my former senior Marine aides said, sir, we're Marines, we like to blow up stuff. But they have embraced this more than any other service. And the reason they did is because at the height of the fighting in Afghanistan, we were losing a Marine, killed or wounded, for every 50 convoys of fuel brought into that country. And that's just too high a price to pay. So the Marines adopted things like solar blankets, about this big. You plug in your radio, your GPS. It saved them 700 pounds of batteries per company, and they didn't have to be resupplied. We've got SEAL teams now getting close to net zero in terms of energy and water. They use alternative energy to purify water. So they can stay in the field for a very long time without being resupplied. And I do get asked questions, particularly sometimes in congressional hearings and stuff. What's Navy doing? Why is Navy doing this? Why isn't this Department of Energy? Why isn't this somebody else? What have you got to do with this? And I always give a couple of answers. One is, we've always led in terms of energy change. Sail to coal, coal to oil, pioneering the use of nuclear. And every single time we've done it, there have been these naysayers. You're trading something that's free, the air, for something that costs money, coal? Or we've got all these coaling stations set up around the world. You're changing that? You're going to just walk away from that infrastructure? Or there is no way you can get a nuclear reactor small enough and safe enough to fit inside a submarine. Well, every single time, they've been wrong. Every single time. They're wrong now. In terms of, we're going to do this. The second thing is that we're big enough. We can bring markets. We can sign 20-year offtake agreements on our basis. We're big enough to create a demand signal. And if you read stuff like The Tipping Point, chaos theory, and systems don't change gradually. Systems change just like that. It stays in equilibrium, and then they change. Well, I said I was in Saudi Arabia. One of my favorite sayings is Sheikh Zaki Yamani, the former Saudi oil minister, said, "The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. It ended because we invented something better." And that's what we're up to, trying to invent something better, trying to make us better warfighters, trying to make us better at what we do. And the work that y'all are doing, the work that's going on all across this country, particularly represented by the people in this room, is crucial work, it's exciting work, and it is going to change, and it is changing. You can see it today, how America views energy, how it uses energy, how it gets energy. So, thank you for that. Thank you for your support of our Navy and Marine Corps away team, and from the Navy, Semper Fortis, always courageous. From the Marines, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Thank y'all.
So we will start with just a question for you. As you indicated, the Navy has been leading the way for quite some time in terms of energy innovation. And congratulations on achieving your goal 5 years early. You've been such a strong leader and advocate. On a personal basis, when did your passion for energy innovation start?
I think it got focused for me in Saudi Arabia when I would see the effect that supply, the effect that price had on our economy, on the world's economy. I used to go see the oil minister every couple of weeks. And my first question would always be, what's the price of oil going to do? And he would always answer, well, it's either going to go up or it's going to go down. And it's sort of like playing the national anthem for a ball game. It's something I had to do, but it didn't have any effect on the outcome. So watching this happen and watching how these oil price shocks and supply shocks would ripple through the economy. And then when I was nominated for this job, Pentagon does a really good job of getting you ready. They give you a little windowless room and you're briefed for an hour in time from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. And just over and over again, the topic of energy kept coming up. And you ought to look at vulnerabilities or your potential adversaries, but you also ought to look at your own potential vulnerabilities and fix them. And so that was That's why I thought this was so important. And you know, we're doing this to be better as a military force. That's the main reason. There's some great side effects. We're better stewards of the environment, we've got a smaller carbon footprint, things like this. But the main reason is it makes us better at what we do. And that is a pretty hard argument to refute, that you don't want your military to be as good as it can be. You don't want your military to be as efficient and as effective as it possibly can be.
We have another question here from the audience. Does energy security affect operational and installation energy use differently?
Say that again. I'm not sure. Whoever asked it, I'm not sure what you're getting at.
So it's around energy security. Okay. And so other than agencies is written out in the margin, the impact on operational installation energy. So operational and installation energy. Is there a person in the audience that asked the question?
Who asked the question? Oh.
You want to elaborate any?
Nobody asked the question. Aha. If you'll tell me who asked the question, I've got a surprise for you.
Okay. So the indication here is that it probably came from the web, and so they're scribbling the notes
I have
here.
a tradition at all hands calls. I give a coin to the first question. So it's really hard to do it on the web.
It is, it is. Okay, so we'll move on to one other one here is what is the incremental fuel cost for greening the fleet? And has the Navy's use of biofuels lowered the cost in the broader market?
Number one of the requirements that I said was we have to be, it has to be cost competitive. And on our bases, getting to 50% or the gigawatt of renewable energy is saving us money. It's actually lowering the costs that we have, particularly over the next few years. One of the problems you've got in any sort of governmental spending is it comes out of different pots. So for solar, for example, when you're putting up solar arrays, it comes out of one pot of money. The fact that you don't have to continue to pay for this comes out of another pot of money. The fact that the only thing you've got to do is maintenance, that you don't have to pay over and over and over again. So it's a little bit hard to do that, but we can absolutely show that we are saving money there. At sea, in our biofuels, we still have the requirement. And even with the dramatic plunge in the price of oil, we think going forward that the indications are biofuels are going to be pretty competitive. And if you look over time, the price of oil and gas goes only one direction. It's going like this. Now there's a sine wave around it. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. But that very volatility also has an impact on us. My first 2 or 3 years as secretary, I was presented with a bill for several $1 billion in unbudgeted price increases for fuel. There's just no place to go get that. You have to steam less or train less or fly less. Or if the bill gets too big, you buy fewer platforms because you can't afford to fuel them. And so getting a more stably American-made price source of fuel that isn't as global a commodity as oil and gas, because even though we're producing all the oil and gas we need now, we don't control the price. It's a global thing. And if something happens, like in Libya 3 years ago, price went up $10 a barrel. Every time the price goes up $1 a barrel, the Navy pays $30 million more for fuel.
So your example about the petty officers making suggestions resonated really well with me, because in the IT industry, we always say innovation comes from the ground up. And so one of the things we try to do is encourage those ideas to bubble up. Are there any organizational activities or changes that the Navy has implemented to try to help those ideas bubble up?
Well, we noticed that there were these great ideas all over the fleet, but normally they would stay with one ship or one base. There were several out there. There was one called Project Athena that the crew, mainly junior officers and NCOs, would get together once a week and discuss ways they could do their job better. It came off one destroyer. And then it spread to sort of the ships on the pier there. And just great ideas would come forward. What we did was, number one, do this task force innovation to try, where are the stumbling blocks? What's keeping some of these ideas from getting up? What's keeping some of the great ideas that come out of Navy research labs from getting to the warfighter real fast? You know, what's slowing it down, and can we improve that? Second is the thing I mentioned, which is we're trying crowdsourcing. All you do is go onto our website. We call it the Hatch, but it's Secretary of the Navy.mil/innovation, and type in what your idea is, and then the rest of the sailors, Marines, Navy can comment on it. You know, no, this won't work. Yes, it will work. I mean, it's the crowdsourcing thing that a lot of companies are doing now, including HP, I think. And we've already started implementing. I presented one 2 weeks ago at Explosive Ordnance Disposal School. The CO there, who's been in the Navy more than 40 years, said that when he took over, they were still training people exactly the same way they had when he came through 40 years before. And it was all paper. It was all, you'd give people, you know, here's a syllabus, here's a course book, and very high attrition rate, mostly from academics. Just about everybody could do it physically. Now, I couldn't, but I mean, when I was down there, they put me in one of these bomb suits. That thing weighed half my body weight. And then they said, you want to walk about 100 yards here? And yeah, I'd like to. But anyway, I did. Still stove up from that. But the people were not getting through the school because the paper sort of study, and they couldn't take it back to their barracks with them. They couldn't review as much as they needed to. They didn't have enough time on task sometimes. So we're giving them pads to upload their lesson plans onto it. And so if they need to do something 3 or 4 times, they can. It's part of it. We've also got a pilot program at Great Lakes where we have our boot camp to give people pads and upload the training syllabus there. When they leave, they can keep whatever they think they need on that pad, but also all their military information is there. Now you got security concerns, you got some of these other concerns, and then developing apps to allow them to access things when they go to a school, to allow them to access it early so that they can be ready when they get there, so that they can do more out of classroom sort of stuff. Those are the sorts of things that we're trying to do. Now that's one end. The much different end that is in your lane is we had a lieutenant that figured out how unmanned aerial vehicles and unmanned underwater vehicles could communicate to each other and could pass that information back to our ships. Did it on his own. sort of in his free time. Well, that had implications way beyond his ship. And we want to recognize these people. We want to recognize them with awards, and if we have any money, with a little money. But most people don't look for, they're not doing this for financial gain, just like most people don't join the military for financial gain. They do it because they think it makes them better at being a sailor, being a Marine.
Awesome, awesome. Secretary Mabus, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you so much. I was reading your bio in the Mississippi Part.